Call upon Professor Bibhas Chaudhary to give his speech.
First of all, I would like to thank the Department of English, Mizoram University, and Sahitya Academy for organizing this seminar symposium. And for having it on such a relevant subject, which, as we have seen from deliberations, have thrown up very interesting ideas and issues related to the twin themes of child lore and identity. I'd like to look at the question of identity as something that forms part of the child's environment and the world that the child emerges from and relates to. Now, as we have seen from the presentations being made and from the keynote address being given, the perceptions are primarily those of the adult, that the adult situates the child as having a particular kind of consciousness and understanding from which the child constructs, organizes, or perceives, and has a particular worldview. It is the adult who regulates that and perceives, and then devises modes of understanding. I would like to look at it from a slightly different perspective, in that within the world of the child, there are certain formations that the child or a group of children organize. And this we can call a kind of myth-making. Every child and the group that the child belongs to, or if maybe the child is a loner, if the child is a completely lonely individual, then the child will have his or her own set of norms that he or she would devise, and that would be operational for the child and form a kind of process that would constitute for him or her a kind of lore. It would then extend to from the siblings in a family, brothers and sisters in a family, and go to the neighborhood, may go to school, and a child would then form their own groups. And what is interesting is that we find this very much in the classroom, where, say, students coming from different locations, and if students coming from the same school join a college, they tend initially to stick to the students from their own school. So there is this comfort zone that the child harbors and is looking to hang on to. Gradually, however, as interaction takes place with others, there is an opening up of the frontier. So from one location, from one particular process of myth-making, there is this engagement with others. And there is this traveling of these ideas. Sometimes we find this in the incorporation of dialect, from certain words from one particular location entering another set of words. So we find this as a kind of cultural travel that enlarges the vision of the child. And when the child goes back home, maybe from the school, maybe from the playground, maybe from interacting with his or her friends, the child will take back home new forms of utterances, maybe language, maybe behavioral patterns. And these are interesting processes in which the child starts identifying himself or herself with a set of norms. Some of the norms are acquired over time, but some of these are liked by the child or considered to be important for his or her identity. So there is this process of lore formation that takes place in the child as the child learns to identify himself or herself as being unique or separate from the world that he or she inhabits. So there's a twin process going on. One is the process of myth making, where a child engages in the process of making a myth through which the child will say, okay, I am different from the rest. And I am different from the rest because I tend to identify with these set of parameters. So it involves a kind of unique identification process whereby the child would like to situate himself or herself as distinctive and then socialize. So this becomes a unique point for the child, an identification marker. Say, okay, I speak like this, or this is what I have. So it is a kind of a takeaway point that this is the material through which I would like to situate myself. So it not only provides the child the wherewithal to situate himself or herself as unique, but also enables him or her to distinguish the difference that he or she has. So we can find this in different kinds of urban legends, different kinds of songs, different kinds of behavioral patterns. We find this in the way people talk or remain silent. So if we look at the representation of this in different media, and there has been references to social media, but I would not like to go into that. But in the way the child would behave with adults, in the way the child would behave with children from another group, and where peer pressure works, this setting of parameters, okay, I like to look at myself in these terms. It could be seen through certain processes which are habituated, which are acquired, and then that is what they hang on to. It could be in the terms of the dress that a child would like to wear, the food that a child would like to eat, the way the child would like to behave, the time the child would take to go to school or dress, and all these things which become part of this entire identity marking process. It gains currency. And it gains currency, we can see this sometimes in school, where, say, there is a senior, there's a boy or a girl who is then seen as a role model. Okay, I would like to be like that boy or girl from this class or that class. So a lore gets developed through this process of myth making, where the child would like to look at something that would give him or her that uniqueness. Sometimes it is acquired through things that are read, heard, stories that are told. And this forms part of what we can call everyday practice. It's not something that is related to the acquisition of literate processes, that we learn these things because we have read it somewhere, or somebody told us this, or this is something I'm writing about. But this is something which happens over time as the people carry on their daily lives. And this is something how the child would then try to interact with the adult. And from what we can see in the way the child behaves and the way the child responds to the world around him or her, sometimes it can be negative in that it could provide the child a sense of insecurity, because there is always the element of competition between the thought processes. Okay, I carry with me the cultural baggage. Now, we know from Eric Auerbach in his book called Mimesis, The Representation of Reality in Western Literature, he made a very interesting comment that we never come alone, that everything is fraught with a background. So the moment a child arrives in a situation, maybe a school, maybe a party, maybe a neighborhood gathering, the child will always come with a baggage. So when introductions take place, the child will be asked, who are you, where do you come from, what are the things you like, what are your hobbies. So immediately this identification baggage starts playing, it starts working. And if that is not up to the mark that is expected, then insecurities creep in. So it is this baggage management process that a child is engaged in, is what contributes to his or her understanding of self. And very often this happens without the child really being conscious about it. And then as it starts working, it can gain momentum provided it gains credence and is given credence by the peers. The peers would then say, oh yeah, this is what I know. So recognition is very important for a child to feel secure and comfortable in the environment the child comes and enters, and then presents himself or herself through a particular identification process. So it is a kind of lower formation that the child carries and presents this as something that he or she has, something that he or she has as others don't have. Now, this entire process can, as I have pointed out, be seen as a kind of myth-making. The child is constantly revising. It's something that constantly undergoes revision as a child acquires, as a layers. It has this ripple effect because he or she gains more and more friends, and the circle becomes wider, and it starts revising the whole idea of identity. And with the acquisition of these layers, the lore with which he surrounds himself, with which he situates himself, makes this entire process a very creative act. It's a process of creation through which he is discovering himself or herself and trying to understand the path through which the self, the conditioned self, is acquiring some kind of knowledge. Now, the moment the child feels that he is comfortable and understands the self, I think that is the point where the child moves from childhood to adulthood. When that sense of confidence comes in, okay, this is who I am. So the lore, the making of the lore, the making of the myth through which the child's mode of understanding, self-understanding comes about, is something that is condition which is in process. It is something which is in process and is being revised and undergoing understanding through the interaction with the world. I've steered clear of the aspects of representation of such ideas and concepts because we don't have time, and that would make it more academic. I would like to, what I'm doing here is looking at the shifting contexts through which a child engages in the process of identity formation by trying to come to terms with the baggage he or she has and processes that for better understanding. Thank you.
Views on the uniqueness of a child's inventive and myth-making, as well as creatively processing the experiences and the cultural ideas towards realizing his or her own identity. So with these words, I think we have come to the end of the presentation, but I will give 10 minutes for interaction. Certainly expect some responses, observations from the audience. And secondly, Professor Khyentse has stressed on very with his knack for fun making always, that he's adept in raising fun, saying that the video and non-video, the difference and all that. So which I would agree. at all how we present that, because there is more to it, more to it. I would say that the world, the Mizo world, the very old, ancient Mizo world was an isolated world. Actually, most of the times I hear that the earlier Mizo people who were living in a confined place, they do not move out easily and all that. That might be one reason of how the ancient Mizo, took long time to come across the other world and interact with the other world. That might be one way of looking at that story, interesting story that
The plain word is made by Chura, because of his clap, and so he made all those things plain. Huh?
Yeah.
And so they were advanced.
Yeah. This is the way of this is the way how to learn certain tricks and to face the other world. This is a true story. Through such children's stories also we learn many things. And that carried, the children's stories carried social codes without knowing, because the adult world is not very alive to, in that sense, how the children very sensitively they carry the cultural baggage without knowing. Because they are very sensitive to the world around them. And they, interestingly and uniquely, atmosphere, environment, how uniquely they take that identification markers in order to realize their own identity in their own way. So this is a creative process, as we have been emphasizing. So with these words, I would invite your responses, your observations, comments, to make it a little more.
Shall I say something? Professor of Commerce. I look like odd man out in this gallery, but I should thank the English department for allowing me to be here. Still, I like to read the children's literature. I feel children's literature is not only meant for children, it is for adults also equally. And there is a shade in every adult. But this identity, coming to identity, I think nowadays children are facing identity crisis. There are certain factors just I have noted down. We are great creators of literature. I have a lot of respect for you. But you need commerce people to market what we are creating. But it's not easy to reach the present day children with our literature. And we are partly responsible being teachers because we have created a rigorous education system. And as parents and as teachers, we are not giving any space and time for our children to read for enjoyment. We are making them to read for ranks. Because I came from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and where students commit a large number of suicides every year. And they go for IIT orientation from class 6. We have created such type of situation. And another thing is this impact of new technology. I'm happy there are certain programs in television. There are programs meant for kids that are quite popular. But at the same time, there are many research studies which indicate that if children go for computer games, and many games are very aggressive in nature, it is affecting their creativity levels, and it is affecting their reading habits, and they are becoming more aggressive, violent in their behaviors. So this is one of the concerns. Then impact of TV, impact of smartphone. Nowadays, the toys industry is facing a tough competition from a smartphone. They like to have a smartphone. They are not interested to play with other types of toys. This is another problem. And another thing is, because of globalization of English language, nowadays many children, they are not in a position to read and write in their mother tongue. Even if they reside in their own states, and we have imposed English on them, and we are thinking in terms of their career. And in that way, they are missing their linkage with their culture. That is another concern. Then there are changes in family system, and we have more number of nuclear families nowadays. And storytelling is one important, beautiful things to happen during childhood. And nowadays, children are staying with their grandparents. Our grandparents are not staying with their children, and they are missing that linkage. And there is growing number of old age homes, and so they are missing that linkage with their culture, their native land. So these are some of the problems, and unless we address these problems, I think this identity crisis is going to be a very serious problem for most of the children. So I enjoyed all your presentations, and better leaders are better storytellers. In management, we read that, and great managers, great leaders, they are also great storytellers. So, and British Council of India, they used to conduct workshops for adults on storytelling, right? So, so that's why I like this topic very much. Thank you.
It's a very simple word. Yes, parenting is very demanding these days, and even teaching. Well, as an author, I'd like to say that, we are trying to write stories that are connected with the children's own lives. The issue still is that literature from the West dominates, because, marketing is a big issue which Indian publishers are not able to spend so much money, or they do not understand the importance of marketing. But I'm happy to say I've been writing books for children for the last 30 years, and I noticed that there has been a real shift during the last 10-15 years, and schools are putting a lot of importance on the reading habit. They're building up their libraries, and I get a lot of invitations from schools to come and talk about my books, because they want to expose children to a variety of books. And also some publishers have book sales in schools, so books are readily available. Then the internet. The internet has been a wonderful thing for the book publishing, because earlier it was very hard to find a particular book. You may want to read it, but from where do you buy it? So that has been a major thing. So I think Indian books by Indian authors and on Indian themes, on the real lives of children, are becoming more readily available, and definitely schools are putting a lot of emphasis on reading, and they are prescribing books by Indian authors as supplementary readers. So there is an attempt, definitely an attempt. The second question you raised, I'm sorry, was
about not having, they're not able to learn their own mother tongue.
Yes, this is what I was talking about to Dr. Namrita in the morning. I asked her, I said, can your son read and write in Bengali? Because I realized that, Hindi is taught in schools, and they learn the script in North India, at least. But our children, my own children, have not been reading fiction in Hindi the way I used to as a child. And it's a little disheartening for me now. And the thing is, time is shrinking because of the weight of the curriculum, as you rightly said. Time is shrinking. But slowly teachers are beginning to realize the importance of reading for pleasure, reading for enjoyment, not just to gain knowledge. I used to go to schools and I used to ask children, why do you pick up a book? And they say, oh, we gain knowledge from books. But I think that whole attitude is changing.
They don't have playgrounds to play.
Yes, they don't have playgrounds. Many urban schools, they have very cramped spaces. So that's unfortunate. But at least an awareness is growing that they should read for fun. And I ran a book club for 10 years where we laid an emphasis on the fact that reading is not for knowledge, it's for fun, enjoyment, because we as a child, I read for enjoyment. It was not because I love stories, you know. Then again, storytelling has made a big comeback. There's a lot of storytelling going on, a lot of storytelling being done, not only in school, but there are festivals. And, you know, the importance of storytelling is being revived. Even the importance of reading aloud is being recognized, reading aloud even to a child who can read for herself. And again, yes, I just recently, Scholastic, a major children's book publisher, they had a very big presentation on that, how important it is to continue to read aloud, because sound is, you know, on the pitch of your voice, it conveys something different from the act of just reading, and reading in isolation, listening to a story in a group. So, you know what our tradition was, definitely you know, our ancients understood certain things. Now about technology, you know, that is a problem as a grandparent, you know, we face. Children are addicted to smartphones and they howl and scream if you take it away from them. So parents have to be very strict. Okay, this is your smartphone or tablet playing time, half an hour, TV watching time, maybe 1 hour, but it needs a lot of willpower on the part of parents. On the other hand, you know, children learn also from the electronic media. There's some excellent programs, and we find it a little funny, you know, our grandson is about 4 years old, and he's addicted to this Peppa Pig program, which is a British program, and he seems to have acquired a British accent from it. But then, you know, his language skills have improved, and he's beginning to understand certain concepts. Because parents are very busy, it cannot be helped, you know, the economic demand means that both parents have to be in office from 9 to 5, leaving the time. And you, as you rightly said about the family situation, families are breaking up, but again, you know, schools, these days they invite grandparents to come and tell stories in the class. So, on the whole, there is an awareness. So, I hope, I'm sorry I'm taking too much time. Thank you so much for your.
In fact, I have 2 or 3 questions, but I'll reduce it to only one. And to Professor Chowdhury, if I heard you correctly in your presentation, you said that the child is constantly revising his identity as a child, you know, all the time. And there is a point in time where he sort of understands himself and moves on to adulthood. Okay, I'm just wondering if the adulthood is also, if the process still continues in adulthood also. I'm just wondering, and I just wanted to clarify on that.
Conscious of the fact that this kind of a revision is going on, whereas the adult would be conscious of the implications of the revisioning process that is ongoing. I think it's an ongoing process for everyone. In the case of the child could move in multiple directions without quite being aware that this is what is going on. The consolidation, I think, takes time of that self-awareness to come in. In the case of the adult, I think a position is taken, and then from that, depending on what is comfortable, is where the adult would venture.
I feel that we have a lot more to do about our own indigenous or national or local traditions about children's literature. We have not so far done that. Citing British American literature and putting forward our ideas, confining our adult readers only to those ideas or exposing those ideas will not do. Because as professors, as thinkers, as serious readers, we must have to do some duty in this regard. And in that direction, we must have to encourage a translation on a massive scale. Translation from our local, from our regional or national languages. India is very rich. I would differ with those who perhaps say that we have not our own children's literature. Actually, we have not read them. Actually, we have not have invested our time to read, Vishnu Sharma's Hitopadesh. We have not read, stories on 32 thrones regarding Vikramaditya stories. They are far, far older traditions, you see. 7th century AD, 13th century AD, and Chaucer had adapted some of his stories. Chaucer, English author, poet, Indian tales. So we must recognize the oath of our own roots some way. Otherwise, investing all our time and all our energy in rereading, rethinking only the British and American, traditions and all that, feeding our children all the time. So this is the time demands that we must have to decolonize some way our mind, our effort. If we do not, if we do not incorporate some of the Mizo children stories into our syllabus, who will? Will the Americans do that? Will the Britishers do that? If we do not know our own Chura, who will know him? Chura, the legendary, legendary hero in many stories in Mizo. Who will do that? So that is why it needs that we need to give a look at those aspects of translation and incorporation of our stories. Interesting, beautiful stories are there, stories into our syllabus in a big way. So that I do not say that we are going to throw away the baby with the bath water, that all that is British or American and all that we will throw away. It's not that. We must enrich those arenas with our own, so that our children and ourselves learn many things from our own root, from our own culture. Thank you. With these words, I thank you once again. Thank you. It's time for lunch, I think. It's time for lunch, yes. All are welcome.
We can start the program with Dr. Professor Thang Bunga, Department of Mizo.
The traditions of children aged 6 to 15 among Mizo tribes. But I would like to begin from the very birth of a child, because that will be more informative. So I have renamed the title, The Traditions of Children Among Mizos, though I have not dared to change the age group. Among the Mizos, it was a Spartan way of feeding a newborn baby with solid food, cooked rice, to test the baby's mettle. A baby who could swallow the chunk of rice would grow up to be a Pasalta, a stalwart in hunting and warfare. A mother never stayed at home for long after giving birth to a baby, but had to carry on work in the tomb, so that the newborn baby had to be fed by all grannies or little sibling girls with boiled rice, chewed to a paste in the tobacco-stained mouth. Child mortality was high, as one old man said. Those who could not die survived. A Mizo child's first lesson are training in coordination of movements such as standing on feet, ding le le. When the child begins to stand, the adult will clap, saying ding le le. And next is walking, kal chet chet. And closing and opening of fist, like tumbailik. The child learns how to close and open the fist, tumbailik. And clapping of the hands, bang tek tek. At the later stage, rolling head over heels, bing bile, can be achieved by a healthy child. It is customary for grown-ups to place a baby on the ankles, and swing it up and down while chanting, "Dai sule pa, daya sule pleb, dai thang vora bing billet." And if the child is brave, they can swing it higher and higher. Some children are very much afraid of this, but some enjoy it. A more advanced practice was to lift the baby standing upright on both palms and lifting it up and down vigorously, according to the child's confidence. This may be regarded as another form of martial training in courage and endurance. Storytelling stage. Between weaning and expectation of the next child, it was customary for children to sleep with grandmas or aunties who undertook the interminable task of telling bedtime stories while having to answer and explain questions of logical and critical nature. It is universal. And play stage. As there was no formal school for learning letters, a Mizo child of both sexes have the whole day for play, except for a brief interval for lunch and midday nap. Come evening, all children would gather at the village gate to meet their parents returning from work. There are plays and games appropriate to various age groups. The following are some games, though there are many, I cannot mention all of it. One is Tumtelek, girls' game of childcare. A small cloth is bundled like a baby. There is a very systematic way of making that bundle by rolling the outside corner, and when they meet the center, they fold it up. After folding it, then they somehow twist round so that it will not come apart. It is a baby. And so they will carry the bundle as a baby on the back and singing the popular lullaby. Kana vihi mule le la be le le imut lo zuan ke man ka beng muang che. It can be sung with a tune also. And next, in Kual Telim. This is also mostly played by girls. It is a game of imitating the daily life and habits of grown-ups. As it is girl play, domestic life is generally the theme of the game. Life of hunting or field work is rarely made the subject of imitation. Next is Tereng Kau. Tereng is that crying insect, singing insect called Saikada. It is plenty in Mizoram. Tereng, Saikada is a popular singing insect, and there are several varieties with different melodies. At night, Saikadas are attracted to light and can easily be caught as they come to sing on nearby branches or walls. It is mostly boys who practice the game. Torch or bonfire is lit to attract the Saikada, and then boys beat bamboo sticks chanting, Tereng o lo ho, alian lian ka lo ho se, atete ka lo hak se, meaning calling the Saikadas to come. Let the big ones come, let the small ones wait for others. Next is Zongalelon. Two rows of children make a bridge with opposite children, crossing both arms like this. The opposite boy will do the same and cuts here, and they'll cut the one, and then they'll make a bridge standing in a row. And one boy will be lifted on this bridge. And as the boy follows that bridge, the end of the bridge will run forward to continue the bridge. It can go on endlessly all night. They enjoyed the game very much. And there is a song accompanying this play. Zong alay lon tim tim, sim zong lay lon zong chal lay lon, zong alay lon tim tim. So the game will continue and continue endless until they tire of the game. These are plays, not games actually, because it is not played with the purpose of winning or competing. Now, there are so many such plays like Pa O In Sial, in which children hold each other and roll into a big bundle and unroll it again, singing that song, Pa O In Sial. And Saku Wilut, where one boy will crawl under the legs of the boy standing before him and standing up again. The next boy will enter again. So in that continuous flow, they will say, Saku Wilut, Wiluta, Arpakal, Sanghar Ngulon, in Rul Puilutin, Tangkong Susan, Inar Pasual, in Buan, Don For Hong Tho, in Suan Kalhen, Kachik, Pi Pusui, Kapup, etc. So many kinds of enjoyments, pastimes are there for Mizo children. They occupy the whole day of children. Now, among the games, I have selected some 3 or 4. Games are never organized competition, meaning in Mizo society, like football game or hockey game, Mizo games are not organized. They are just street plays. But another form of play with definite objectives of goal and victory. These games are involuntary training in development of mind and skill in which organizing ability is built up for future responsible life. In Biruk Siak, that means hide and seek. It's common to all children. This universal game of hide and seek and needs of elaboration. 2 or more children forming 2 groups compete in one who can hide longer before being discovered. The word of readiness is Tik Katiam. As soon as one group or one boy hides, he will utter Tik Katiam, while the one who is going to search, to seek, is blindfolded. Next, in Koiba, a game played with a big round flat bean called koi, in various modes separately by boys and girls. Girls' game is called in Koiba. Each player has one bean, B-E-A-N, and the game is played between 2 opposing groups. Beans of one side are stood in a row, and the opponents having the move shoot at the row of bean from a designated distance by throwing from between the legs. Like they take this coin between the fingers and they shoot it in that manner, the girls. Between the leg with both hands and the bean held flat between crossed fingers. If the movers fail to hit all the bean, they are considered as miss, and the turn goes to the other group. The boys' game, called in koi nok, consists in shooting the bean from under one leg, raised by lifting one foot with one hand and shooting the bean with the other. I can do it now because my leg is stiff. Yeah, the bean will be held like this, and one hand will catch the ankle, and they will try to shoot from under the knee. These koi games are progressed in stages called bu. From one step to a more difficult step, then they will complete the stages which are called bu. When they finish all the stages, they will return to move number 1, which is called bullet, meaning returning the bu. Next, in war. It is a juggling game with 5 stones or pebbles. The stones are held in one palm. At first move, only one stone is thrown up. While the other stone is still in the air, the remaining 4 are quickly placed on the floor in time to catch the falling stone. I am not very good at this. They hold all the stones and throw up one, place the 4th stone, catch it, and so the game becomes more and more difficult. This in war is played by both boys and girls. Kalset This is stilt, walking on stilt, bamboo stilt. The game is played with bamboo stilt mainly by boys. The height of the footrest progresses with the age and ability of each boy. The game is played individually by trying to throw the others from their stilt. Sometimes some boys will stand as high as this. Only skilled boys can do that. A beginner will do it from about 6 inches high. So higher and higher they will progress. Another fun practice of those children is Ponto. Before children went to school and below that with homework, they come together at early evening hours after supper to the open ground or platform to play or listen to stories from an old man willing to entertain them. Ghost stories and jungle stories are favorites. But while the moon is shining, daytime games are also played at night also. Ponto, every child will spend outside from about 6 o'clock to about 8 o'clock outside. Ramva, there is hunting. It was an enjoyable adventure for boys between the ages of 10 to 15 to go trekking in nearby forests and rocky streams for the mere pleasure of it, as well as to train their bodies and stamina for the arduous task of hunting and other responsibilities of grown-up men. Boys are usually skillful with bow and pellet. Shooting and trapping birds and rodents is a fun pastime of boys. Pellets for the bow are made from clay, rolled in a ball the size of marble, and dried in the sun or fire. Trap for birds called thang theng, made of bamboo rod, is laid on the branches of a tree having edible fruit. Sadal and pi are traps laid on the ground for fowls. Squirrels are trapped with another kind, thangchep. And rodents like rat are caught with thangchep. So many varieties of traps are made by Misos. Ting noi phom, that means collecting firewood. In all Miso village, there used to be a big house called Zolbuk, wherein all unmarried young men gathered by night and slept, so as to be ready to stand in group in defense of the village from enemy raids and attacked by beasts of prey. It was the duty of all elder boys, that is under 15, to provide fuel for the fire at Zolbuk. If anyone does not deposit his portion of fuel, he will be punished. Ponlem ta and buolem trap, meaning waving and winnowing rice. Girls at an early age are given training in weaving at the Chinese model of loom with bits of thread left over by adults. They also learn sifting and winnowing of rice with dust in a round mat called thangra lem. Thangra is that sieve. And there is a song accompanying this. Zolbuk nuaya buolem kan trap chiama marthaga sain kelpelo ange. The Miso house is built on stilt about the height of 6 feet or 8 feet, and underneath there is plenty of dust made by animals. So these dust are being sifted and winnowed by girls for training. Regarding manner and code of conduct, it is more than customary for younger ones to obey one's elder, especially in going errands. One must always use the courteous ka'u to address an older person. And married men or women are called pu or pi. Test of courage. Boys over 12 years compete in courage by a game called Mecherinda Siek, that means placing the torch. It is a game in which a boy carries a torch at night in the jungle path as far as he dares. The others compete one by one to sieve the torch further. It's a very difficult game because forests were infested with wild animal strikers at night. It was a very risky game. Now, these are what I have collected from my own memory and my own practice in my younger days, which are now collected in 2 popular books by Agriculture Department, which you can purchase, but it is in Mizo language. Thank you.
Now the second speaker is Dr. Anjali Multani from IIT New Delhi.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Margaret for inviting me here. And thank you all for staying awake after lunch. I hope that doesn't change. So the title of my paper is I Want to Be. This is a very standard, almost cliched statement of children. You know, we ask children, what do you want to be? Children say, I want to be. And this is how they describe their dreams and ideals. And this I want to be is, as many scholars have already told you in the morning, the whole idea of the subjectivity of the I, the category of child itself, is always constructed for us from the very beginning. Some critics argue this is constructed from the womb itself, where sometimes gender identities are celebrated, announced, mourned. When we talk about the self, there are many aspects to this self. We sometimes refer to some aspects as identity. And identity has, let's say, different understandings. So you have the political or official understanding. I'll tell you what the UN says, which is very formal. Identity is a legal concept within the UN Convention. It is every child's entitlement from birth. The child shall be registered immediately after birth and shall have the right from birth to name, the right to acquire a nationality, and, as far as possible, the right to know and be cared for by his or her parents. Obviously, this is a completely inadequate definition. There are many complex layers and variations of what we understand by identity. There is, at the very least, a dynamic between a personal versus a social identity. Personal identity refers to, since we're talking about children, let's say children's subjective feelings about their selves, their distinctiveness from others, their sense of uniqueness of individuality. Social identity, on the other hand, can be used to refer to ways in which children feel they are or would like to be the same as others, typically through identification with family or peer groups, etc. So identity has at least these 2 distinct aspects, right? So one of the unique individual and that of the shared social person. These identities are distinct, yet they are linked with each other. How we see ourselves is formed by and forms how we see others and how we perceive we are seen by others. Our sense of who we are is formed in relation to a network of cultural, social, economic, and political forces. Our senses of self begin to be formed right at the beginning of our lives, and this process continues dynamically throughout. Children form their own senses of identity through their own subcultures. They accept and transform social realities around them in different ways. Adult social practices, community cultures, social beliefs are handed down and mediated in different ways. So a lot of it depends on the opportunities that children have in school, outside school, for reflecting on their social relationships, on who they are. And in this process, they build up what we call a narrative self. Now, the idea of narrative self is something that is there both in psychology as a very important concept, as well as in the study of literature, which is my specialization. So in the idea of a narrative self, we think of the self as a narrative, clearly, or as a story, rather than as substance or thing. And I think this is what was talked about in the morning also, the idea of a dynamic and evolving sense of self. So in literature, Paul Ricoeur has talked about the operation of narrative emplotment. That is, we configure the events and the happenings in our lives into a meaningful whole. My self-concept or self-identity is fashioned by adapting plots from my own cultural stock of stories and myths. So stories of personal identity will differ, obviously, from literary productions in that they are constructed within an unfolding autobiography and incorporate the accidental events and unintended consequences of action. This is an important process in childhood, but it's one that continues through adulthood as well. Children derive ideas of the self from their immediate context of family, community, tradition, stories, myth, other cultural texts such as literature, movies, music, theater. These selves are tested out in games and play, among other expressions. Games, role-playing, enactment, these are all important illustrations of how children interpret the world around them, what processes and hegemonies they see as powerful and operating on them. When a child says, "I want to be," she is simultaneously empowering herself with proactive agency and showing the limits of that imagination. Child psychologists try to understand play in terms of self-realization, of how the child distinguishes fantasy from reality, how the child builds a social network, how children learn to manipulate the world without fear of social consequences. It is through play that children learn social rules and enact them. It is also through play that children can learn to not necessarily accept rules as they are given. In one of the most basic forms of play, and I'm sure we all remember this, we assign, as children, we assign roles to ourselves and to others, and very often this is based on a complex relationship of who's powerful. So I could tell a friend, "I'll be this and you be that." And then if the friend accepts my authority, they could say, "Okay," or they could say, "No, I want to be something else," or "I want to be what you are playing." So a child will assign usually the most powerful role to themselves and ask friends to play at the other less powerful roles. How much you get away with this depends on how creatively you can improvise as a child. So when you're playing, your development of scenes as a child becomes a play world for fixing and unfixing and refixing reality without the fear of social constructs or reprisal, because we can always turn back and say, "We were only playing." As adults, we say, "I was only joking." Play experiences can have, therefore, the capacity to interrogate, resist, reinforce, or alter overlapping identities of race, class, gender, or ability. When we play, we transform the ordinary world and ourselves into something else. We can be whoever we want, whatever we want, wherever we want. The limits of this are defined by our imaginations, but our imagination is bounded or shaped by the material world we have around us. Stories, literature, these are alternative aesthetic forms of communication, which also provide us with opportunities to create and transform. Our ways of reading help shape our ways of being. If we are controlled by the narrative we find ourselves in, there will naturally be less capacity to imagine and create change. Encouragement for creative reading, for interventions, critical, questioning engagement with the narrative empowers us to intervene in the narratives of our social and political lives. Fantasy, that old favorite of children's literature, is perhaps a genre that most directly taps into this capacity to resist and transform the world around. Fantasy is deeply engaged with the very ideas of transformation of fluid identity. Ordinary, everyday objects can and do become magical gateways into other worlds, where powerless children find strength, power, intelligence, and other virtues. These virtues are not given by somebody outside or delivered from above. These are discovered as hidden resources within the child herself. The most powerless child at the bottom of the totem pole will discover that she can fly, she can kill a dragon, she can rule a kingdom. Fantasy focuses on the liminal, on the disguised, showing us it does not do to assume things are exactly as they seem. A tin can be a portal to a Quidditch match. A wardrobe may take you into Narnia. Photographs, trees, paintings, pencils, hats, all these objects become transformative. Now, if we're pouring the cold water of reality, we'll say these objects do not transcend reality. The important thing to remember here is that the child's engagement with the objects does. And this is a very crucial difference in forming identity or in the project of what we can call self-construction. As a literature person, if I say self-construction, I'm thinking of Stephen Greenblatt. And Greenblatt discusses in his very famous essay the success of Iago, a relatively powerless individual, and how Iago manages to overturn and destroy even more powerful people than him. Greenblatt calls this improvisation strategy of Iago a process of fictionalization that transforms a fixed symbolic structure into a flexible construct which is ripe for improvisational entry. I'm not saying we should all become Iagos. I bring him up here as an example of the power of imagination, of improvisation, and creative role play that can manipulate and alter seemingly solid social realities. There are many things we don't know about our brains. Lotto Lab Bo Lotto, he's a neuroscientist, he runs a blog. He says that we interpret the difference between reality and fiction only in terms of our prior experience. I'll quote, "Your eyes can't tell the difference between something that is unlit that's sticking up or a hole. Your brain couldn't tell the difference if you lacked the experience to eventually differentiate one from another." His point is that the world we perceive is not the world itself, but it is our story of the world based on our knowledge and what we have learned from others. He says the world has no meaning by itself. We supply the meaning. We make up stories, and that story contains things that actually happened, and it contains things we've imagined, like mythology, religion, fairy tales, fiction, and so on. Interestingly, according to Lotto, both actual and imaginary content light up the same area of our brains, suggesting they are ultimately equally real to us deep down inside. J.K. Rowling literalizes this magical power of transformation right through. So she uses, if you've all Harry Potter fans? Any Harry Potter fans? Okay, so in the third novel of the Harry Potter series, The Prisoner of Azkaban, the Boggart. So the Boggart is introduced to us. The Boggart is exercised to teach children how to confront and defeat our worst fears. And it's not just children, it's us. Unlike the Dementors, who are also another important device, the Boggarts are not actually evil. So the Boggarts, for those who don't know, are shape-shifting creatures. They take the shape automatically of whatever it is that you fear the most. So if you fear witches, for example, the Boggart will become a witch for you. But if your friend fears the dark, the Boggart will become darkness. So Boggarts illustrate many, many important lessons that our biggest enemies are actually our own fears hiding within us. They can and they must be faced to be conquered, and that the best magic against them is actually really no magic at all, but laughter. The Boggarts that Harry and his friends face in the classroom are not special manifestations of extraordinary otherworldly evil. They are every ordinary child's fears and terrors. What do children fear? Children fear authority figures, uncontrolled authority figures, anger, disapproval, disappointment, mummies, unfair teachers, ghosts, banshees, lack of privacy, lack of self-control, lack of control over your life. Someone tells you, go there, sit here, the bell has rung, eat your breakfast, go to sleep, get off the phone, don't watch TV. All the time, this is what we fear the most. Harry and his friends may, in the novels, have a wand and a spell to defeat the Boggart, but for these to work, there must be intent. As another character says in the same series, it's not enough to just say the words, you must mean them. So even without the wand and the spell, the child reader learns if you have the intent, magic can happen. Children get pilloried for asking too many questions. We get irritated with them as adults once you grow up, and you know that you're growing up soon as you start getting irritated with your younger person asking questions. Why, how, where, why not? And sometimes we get so annoyed, we say the worst thing possible. We say, because I said so. Or we say, that's the way it is. When children ask questions, they are asking questions of dominant narratives, and so they are exploring possibilities of change. They know something is unfair. They know when adults are saying one thing and doing another. If we repeatedly state that narratives are not flexible, that authority lies only in certain hands, is not open to change, we are trapping children into accepting predetermined roles they will never be able to think of challenging. One of the ways in which society tends to discourage creative self-formation is not just by our own acceptance of dominant ideologies of caste or gender or community, but also through a belief in essentialism. Lots of people have challenged the idea of essentialism, and critically, intellectually, we may do so ourselves. But it is a deeply embedded process in our lives. We go back to Harry Potter. And again, those who know the book will know what I'm talking about. So in Harry Potter, one of the greatest things is this transformation of everyday objects. And she takes the everyday objects, talking maps or moving moving stairs, and incorporates them with another beloved of childhood fiction, which is a boarding school. Now, we've all been through school, and we know that in schools, the first thing that happens is you're divided up into houses. Usually, these are 4 houses for some strange reason. Usually they're organized according to color. They also have a motto, and these mottos have qualities. And somewhere these qualities become self-fulfilling characteristics. So we can tell our younger siblings, oh, you belong to this house, or I can see that you were in that house. The twist in Harry Potter is that children are sorted into houses by what they call a sorting hat. So this hat you put on your head, it scans the inside of your head, and it tells you you can be in this house or that house or the other house. Knowing this and believing that what's inside is unchangeable and definitive, Harry lives in fear he will be put into a house called Slytherin. He talks back to the hat. He says, I don't want to be in Slytherin. The hat listens to him, and the hat puts him in another house. So Harry participates in his own self-construction, changes the narrative at the very start of his story. This crucial change affects many important plot points in the text. It serves, first of all, to immediately set Harry apart from Voldemort the villain, who did not believe that essentials could be changed. The fundamental change that Harry effects in his own life is what separates him from the others, and almost more than any other plot point defines Harry as a hero. Am I doing okay on time? Yeah. The perspective on essentialism works to define and limit children in their action and imagination. The attraction of comic book superheroes, fantasy narratives, whether you're reading about them or you're playing at them, defies those boundaries. These genres show us that fear and desire are literalized. They are not escapist fantasies. You know, a child is not escaping, or I'm not a child, but I love reading this, so I'm not escaping or ignoring or evading reality. Reality bites very hard in superhero fantasies. Just think of all the superhero fantasies. Superman, his entire planet is blown up due to environmental problems. Spider-Man often loses his uncle in street-side violence. Batman witnesses his parents being killed. I mean, I could go on. I don't think there's a single superhero who has a happy childhood. Psychologists tell you that fantasy play is a very important element in developing communication skills, which are necessary for living in society. They say that when we play in fantasy games, we are inquiring into challenges and responsibilities of social living. There's another critic, Joseph Campbell. He's got a theory of the hero quest. This forms a structural basis for many fantasy narratives. So it's a very simple structure. There is a powerless and an orphan child. If you haven't read, you must have seen Lord of the Rings, I'm sure. So powerless child answers a call of adventure, finds older guides, finds helpers, is helped, but eventually has to overcome and conquer evil by themselves. This is obviously a very attractive role model for children. It shows you that you can do things on your own. You don't need family backing. You don't need the name. You can test the depths of your own character, and you get your own identity at the end of the quest. So, as I've already said earlier, both fantasy and play are transformative. They enable and empower radical changes in the spaces around us. Trees are changed into portals to other lands. An ordinary jungle gym set in a playground can become a magic bus. It takes you to different places. This power of transformation is most valuable not only in developing individual character, but in building communities. Play is the vehicle by which people display their character, capabilities, status, not only as individuals, but as communities. The previous speaker has already talked about this from Mizo Society. In play, people envision and enact the possibilities of living in their societies, and for that reason, it becomes an important agency of social and cultural change. Self-experience for children differs a little bit from that of adults. Different genders, social classes, ethnic groups, and generations come to somewhat different conclusions about who they are and what their possibilities for living might be. To summarize, we experience and express selfhood, like play, in many ways. So when children play, they realize themselves through activity in the world. Play is a balancing act with an individual moves being in and out of control. There are certain elements in play that you can control, certain elements which you can't. As adults, we participate in a world largely external to us, one that obeys its own logic and necessities. Other people have their ideas about what they want to happen. The material environment is indifferent to our concerns. Culture follows its own logic, its own action. Our bodies have their own processes, many of which defy our own control or consent. Sometimes even our mind doesn't listen to us. To have a self is to identify which of these ongoing processes and patterns we can claim as our own, and to turn these possessions into resources that we can use to manage our lives. That self-quest is identical to the quest of play, and that is something we should learn to carry with ourselves on our own journeys from childhood to adult. Play is an exploration of power and predicament. We play to find out what we can and cannot do, to see how much we can extend our capabilities. As a consequence of these attempts, we learn what the world can do to us and what we, in turn, can do to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali, for your paper on the unique self of children. Next resource person is Dr. Lalrindike Fanai, Department of English, Mizoram University.
My paper is based on childhood memories related to the Mizo traditional, what is called Serle Sang. And if I am to translate it in English, it will be the Mizo traditional do's and don'ts. And because I grew up in a storytelling atmosphere, and my grandfather was a very good storyteller, and most of the stories that we heard as children in our family, somehow whatever we heard about it, it has remained, as it is till today. Now, I want to illustrate one thing about the rhythm, that according to me, a rhythm can only be what my grandfather told me. Like, you give me rock music, rock beat, you give me hip hop or whatever, the modern this thing. But my concept of a rhythm would always be what my father or grandfather told me. Now, he used to tell me about a story. I tried to find the story. I haven't been able to do that, about a frog. And then after that, there is a song where we used to call it the frog song. And then when he sang the song, after every sentence, he would say, "Pim, pim, 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 pim." And that's my concept of rhythm to this day. And then the image of flood is also formulated in my childhood by listening to the story, the folk tale of Ngai Tehi. Right? Ngai Tehi, in short, drowned in a flood. And when my grandfather described the flood, it's muddy, swelling, all that. And that image till today continues to be my concept of the flood. Now, I want to start with the Mizo traditional family where, certain instructions are given to children, and also what happens at the birth of a son or a daughter. Now, we all know that Mizo society is a patriarchal society, and since jhum cultivation was and still is the main source of sustenance, having as many children as possible was considered important, mainly because for the family workforce, or for the future warriors, perhaps, because in the past they always have had this inter-village wars. And when a boy child is born, their joy rested in the hope that one day he would become either Ral in Hal Tu, that is, one who would set the enemy's house on fire, all right? And or Saikaptur, they used to call it Saikaptur, that is to kill an elephant, that is to become a hunter, okay? And if a girl child is born, they would hope that she will grow into a beautiful young lady, so that she would fetch a bride's price, including a mithun, that is semantur. They call it semantur. So they have their notion of the children at birth, depending on the gender, like this, because we all know that in Mizo marriage there is a bride's price, which is still observed today in token, and then if you are worth a mithun, then that enriches the family fortune. And an interesting aspect of the Mizo traditional family was that it was almost a taboo for the family to share moments of laughter. It was not customary, especially for a husband and wife, to show affection to each other. They never looked at each other in the eye, and the wife never addressed the husband. In fact, they always spoke to each other in angry tones. Now, this was because they believed that if they showed any sign of affection, the Kwanu, the spirit, would be jealous and put either of them to death. And they considered no patrangten, that is, death of either of the spouse, separation, etc., a great tragedy that could befall a family. Now, the family is the informal, as we have heard it, Zolbuk was also the informal place, a place for informal education, and even the family was also, and still today is a place of informal education. And the instructions given by the parents and the expected behavior of children in the community denotes that Mizo traditional community gives utmost respect to older people and stresses on the tradition of hard work. Now, this is inculcated from childhood. For instance, when meals are taken, the children were taught not to eat first in respect of the older members of the family. That is, not to, we call it sobar, we eat it with our hand, and we know that you are not supposed to take your rice first with your hand, okay? And they should eat only when the older members have started eating, and they were also taught not to be the last one to finish the meal. At home or when community feast was held, children waited for the other people to have first as a sign of respect. A song to this effect was also composed, and unlike my other presenters, I am not able to sing it because I had gone to a person and I wanted to ask him to sing it for me, but he sang it, but he refused to be taped or recorded. And it says, Roy Tena, so kil tehian barmas tu aningay lo. Upabirin a barmas so no pangin anbar kalngaylo. It's this is the meaning is that when you have a community feast, and then you eat together with the older people, you are not supposed to take the meal first, and let the older people have first, and then the children will follow. This was considered an important aspect of Mizo, aspect of Klomgaina, taught from childhood also. Now, another aspect of how children were prepared for future hard work was the habit of getting up before sunrise. It was customary for children in Mizo traditional society to get up before sunrise. Getting up late was attributed to laziness. There's a song for this which children used to sing, and then they would say, Ni atswake, the sun has risen. Kamu masaber, I am the first one to see it. Liandawa te komtsara, at the backyard of Liandawa, Savate and Te, the birds are loitering about. Okay, so I would like to mention about courting and marriage, because although I thought it was not taught, the taboos that are associated with this, although I thought that it was not taught in childhood, but some of them are saying, some of the people that I interviewed said that now the meal, the dining table, is a place where parents used to tell the children what to do and what not to do. So in the course of the discussion, they must have said about all these taboos in marriage. So I'm just going to mention about courting and marriage, and then a number of restrictions are being imposed upon the young girl, and the traditional Mizo community had a high expectation regarding how a young girl conducts herself before marriage. The tradition of courting, that is, young boys courting a young girl at night in her house, was and still is an integral part of Mizo traditional life. In the past, a young girl may have many quarters, that is, inlaying visitors or inlaying at night, depending on her beauty and good reputation. And in fact, it was considered a shame for a young girl not to have an inlaying. Amidst more than one quarters, the young girl was expected to give equal attention to everyone. And there were times when this quarters would test the patience of the girl, etc. Now, in the search of a suitable bride, the Mizo were particularly careful about the genealogy of the girl with reference to kleptomania, death at childbirth, differently abled or mental disorder, epilepsy, and they said koshing, meaning if any member of the family or the ancestor or is possessed by a spirit. And the reason for tracing the genealogy is denoted in the Mizo proverbs, where it says, meaning that in an apple tree you will not find another fruits, for example. So they say that some of this would have been heard by the children at home, because they are very, very particular about these things at the time of finding a suitable daughter-in-law. Now, another thing that is connected with what they used to say to children is that when you are having your meal, all right, you are encouraged by the older people and the elders to take, to have lots of rice, I would say. There's no translation in English really, to take a large handful of rice and put it into your mouth, because that is a sign of health, okay? And this is related to how they look out for a daughter-in-law. Now, the daughter-in-law was generally considered to be an additional workforce for the family, so health was very important. In order to see whether a prospective bride would be healthy or not, they use these strategies. Now, I have interviewed about 4 people, and these are the things which I have heard in childhood and in teenage and all that, but maybe because we have become so educated and informed as a community that it has not been written mentioned in any written document. But to the older generation, this time when I interviewed them also, they say it is true. But the younger, slightly refined, gentlemen were saying maybe it is just a myth, because what I'm going to mention is quite crude, but it's having, the size of the rice that you take with your hand, all right, when you eat is important because it denotes health. So when they when they look for a prospective bride, they would try and see atsobar alianem, like when she's eating, how much of the rice that she takes in her hand as she puts it in her mouth, is it big or not? If it is big, then it's a sign of health, okay? And then one scoop of the hand, if one scoop of the hand is big, it was considered healthy. And then the next one is aectum alianem, which is that in the past, nature call, that is to defecate, used to be done at the outskirts of the village in the bush. They would go and see if the excretion of that young girl is solid or big, which was considered also a healthy sign. Now, some of them, when I interviewed them, some of them said, no, this could not happen because they were feeling a little bit embarrassed. But these are the things which you have heard in childhood also. So, but to the older generation, they said, yes, it is true, because these are the signs of health. The amount of food that you put in your hand when you eat. Okay, so, and then it has to do with the excretion also. So another aspect that I would like to talk about in the marriage system is that I was told that I wasn't aware of this, really, but in the family, when people get married, for example, when my siblings got married and all that, we consider the position of loitzal very important. And somebody had remarked to me that in the past, a loitzal, who is the escort of the bride, like the children finds it a privilege if they could go near the loitzal during a marriage in the past. And then and this could have been a privilege for them because the function of the loitzal and the position of the loitzal is so important in Mizo traditional marriage. Until today, we follow that in token, right? But there is always a loitzal from the maternal side, the uncle maternal side, who would escort the bride to the husband's house. Now, the traditional Mizo calendar, the month of August is known as Thitintla, which is in the month of August, all the spirits of the dead will leave this world. And so it is not considered to get married during, it is considered inauspicious to get married within this month. And then the role of loitzal is very significant as it is rooted in the traditional belief of prosperity in marriage, for instance. Now, a loitzal is one who escorts the bride to her new home. In the past, cow dungs, dirts, or pebbles were thrown at the bride while going to her husband's house. It was a task of the loitzal to protect the bride from getting hurt, and if it was a rainy season, the loitzal also had to see that the new bride didn't slip due to the slippery road. If the bride slipped, it was considered very inauspicious and the marriage was always cancelled. Okay, and I will go to the Mizo traditional hospitality towards visitors because as children, when we have visitors in the house, we are always told by our parents that we behave well or asked to go to play outside so that we will not disturb the guests in the house. Now, this is related to Mizo traditional hospitality also. And I'm trying to link it to the traditional thing. And then by tradition in the past, people from one village to another, seldom visit each other. For the sake of security, roads from one village to another were not maintained properly. And it could be said that the link from one village to another was almost non-existent. However, this doesn't denote that the village never had a visitor. In the event of someone visiting a village, the visitor generally belonged to a village whose chief was in cordial relationship with the chief of the village he visited. At times like this, the visitor or the guest was received with utmost hospitality. It was a tradition for the visitor as he entered the village to say, Min Theng Theyangem, that is, can I be your guest from one door to another? And Min Theng Theyangem. And the first thing that when people said yes to that, the first thing they would give to the guest is Zufang, which is a liquor made of starch rice. And after that, they invited the neighbors, and each would bring their own zoo, while the host would open the big jar in which he kept the house, he kept the zoo for the house and family, for all to share in honor of the guests. Now they would entertain the guests. At bedtime, the wife of the host would take out a new puan, that is the mekhla that we are wearing, which is called puan thul kung for the guests to use. But there are times when a village refused shelter to a visitor of their village. Now, this was considered by people as a serious case of rudeness, and they believed that such a village never prospered. So, what our parents had told us in terms of hospitality to guests is related to the traditional Mizo practices. Okay, I think I will end here because we're running out of time, though there are so many things to talk about where children are concerned. And I would like to end with this note by saying that when we really looked into the treatment of children in the village, in the traditional Mizo village, sometimes it appears that very little importance were given to children because they are always asked to play outside, you know. But I think it is not so much of what their attitude towards the children, but it is because of the kind of workload that the mother has in the domestic chores that she has to do, that they often told the children to play outside. And sometimes there is a saying that people used to say, like when they ask the children to go out and play, they would say, "Uiteri minnam," that is, you smell like dogs, so please go out, you know, like that kind of thing. Anyway, I think so many things have to be looked into, examined as yet, because some of the things that I have said are never recorded in writing. It's only now when we have to go, and there are so many other things that we have to continue to retrieve from people's memories and then perhaps documented them in writing later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dicky. Our next resource person is Dr. Nabanita Sengupta, Department of English from Kolkata.
Thank you. Firstly, I must thank the Department of English of Mizoram University and also Sahitya Academy for providing me this opportunity to deliberate on a topic which has been quite close to my heart. Now, the topic of my paper is Krishna's modern avatars, reshaping the lores of Krishna in contemporary animations for children. Now, as the title of my paper says, the focus is on the various representations and reinterpretations of Krishna, the Hindu god, the human avatar of the god Vishnu, and one of the most popular mythological characters in the contemporary television animation programs in India. And his popularity is not actually restricted to the television animation. In fact, as we know from Professor Gupta's paper in the morning, that first Amar Chitrakatha was also, the topic of first Amar Chitrakatha was also Krishna. Now, the seminar, because it focuses on the identity and child lore, I'm going to explore the ways in which gender and identity politics are negotiated through the representation of the child god Krishna in the context of Indian television. In the television industry, children form a separate target community, particularly from the post-cable TV era, where there's been a number of kids' channels with entertainment programs specially designed for children of various age groups. Among these, cartoons or animation series form one major genre, and today one of the major activities for children with an access to television and cable network at home is viewing cartoons. Though Indian media is flooded with Disney characters, Japanese animations, programs like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or Doraemon and Ninja Hattori, which are being currently aired, and also the superheroes from the Marvel and DC series, in the recent years, a number of indigenous cartoon shows have come up and are dominating the animation world of Indian children's television. While some of the shows are secular, there are almost an equal number of shows deriving their origin. The protagonists are derived from the Hindu mythologies. The secular shows, like there are shows called Chor Police or Motu Patlu, Pakram Pakrai. These are all produced by the Indian are all Indian productions. They are popular, but then the recent trend shows that mythology-oriented animations are gaining ground fast. Now, the current media research, and there are various sources which shows that Chhota Bheem is the most popular show on air. The protagonist of this show is inspired by the Bheem of Mahabharata. I don't know how many of you have seen the cartoon of Chhota Bheem. It's the warrior from Mahabharata who's well known for his valor as well as his love for food. And Chhota Bheem is the remodeling of that warrior prince in a contemporary setting. The creation of Chhota Bheem has triggered of unprecedented popularity in the Indian scenario, and it has led to an onslaught of many more mythology-inspired animations in the Indian television. Shows like Krishna and Balram, Bal Hanuman, Bal Ganesh, these had predated the Chhota Bheem. But it's actually with Chhota Bheem of Green Gold Animation that the animation program for children in India actually came of age. Interestingly, in spite of Chhota Bheem being undoubtedly the most popular character in the Indian animation, at least according to the TRP ratings, Krishna, the mythological hero, remains the most recreated character in this genre. In fact, there's a whole new series of movies and episodes where this Chhota Bheem and Krishna come together, with Krishna being that rescuer and his friend when he is caught in a very difficult problem. So by the sheer number of shows which draw their sources for him, Krishna becomes the most popular character in the present day animation. Krishna, the figure of Krishna actually occupies a very unique position in the liminal space of the genres of myth and folklore both. He definitely has his origin in the Hindu mythology, but the stories of his life, particularly his childhood romances with the gopis and the slaying of various demons, can also be categorized as part of the lores. The action-packed life of this god in his human reincarnation bestows him with a superhero stature and makes him the most adaptable for the children's stories. Presently, in Indian television, there are at least 4 ongoing animation shows that have Krishna as their protagonist. Krishna Balram by the Green Gold Animation, who are also the producers of Chota Bheem. Little Krishna by Big Animation and Indian Heritage Foundation. Interestingly, Little Krishna has also, the producers of Little Krishna had also derived and they appointed members of ISKCON to give them a proper understanding of the character. And then there is Kisna by Cosmos Entertainment and Maya Digital Studio, and Roll Number 21, produced and aired by the Cartoon Network of India. Now, while Krishna Balaram and Little Krishna are actually the adaptations and tell the retellings of the stories of the life of the mythical hero Krishna, his various escapades and the way his slayings of various demons, Roll Number 21 is a modern reinterpretation of the enmity between Krishna and Kamsa. The setting is a school and a hostel where Chris, who's the modern incarnation of Krishna, and a handful of other students stay and study. Kanishk is the school principal who's the present-day Kans and is forever trying to evoke demons from Patal Nagari or the underworld to kill Chris and his fellow students. Each episode is actually a battle between Chris and demons of Kanishk, or Kanishk himself, which ends with the triumph of Chris over the other evil elements. Kisna, on another animation, does not claim to be a direct adaptation of the Krishna stories. However, there is definitely a distinct similarity between the child hero Kisna, his elder brother Ballu Bhaiya, a name inspired by Balram. He also has a friend, the only girl within the core group called Radhika, and his friend Suddhi. So the similarities go much beyond just the similarities of the name. In order to illustrate, I have 3 small clippings which I'm going to show. These are actually full movies, but I'm going to just quickly go through them so that you get just an idea. This is the story of the Kaliya Daman, where Krishna kills that serpent Kaliya, who's been poisoning the waters of Yamuna. What happened?
waters, the poison that bubbles thick in your mind and your turn.
"5,000 years ago, a most wonderful boy came to make the beautiful land of Vrindavan his home. He spent all the years of his blissful childhood here, filling the hearts with pure love for him. Along with them, he performed his amazing pastimes and left his lotus footprints in the dust of these enchanting forests."
I'm sorry, somehow this the part where actually Krishna kills Kaliya does not come, but I guess you got a glimpse of the character of Krishna from here. This is actually the second one, which is actually the reinterpretation of role number 21.
नहीं तो क्या मैं कर चुए क्या है जवाब गोलू?
जी
सर, सही जवाब है एक मुर्गी। क्या मुर्गी? मजाक सूझ रहा है? हाँ? पढ़ाई में ध्यान नहीं है क्या?
सर, बबलू ने भी तो यही लिखा था।
ओ, तो इस क्लास में 2 शैतान है।
I'm just skipping. This is the part where children play, and this is the bully in the group.
बबलू के बच्चे, क्लास में तो मुझे सर से मार खिलवाना चाहता था। अगली बार ऐसी बदमाशी की तो
And this is Kanish, who's the modern
बजाई है
Kamsa.
तुमने क्रिस, तुम तो बहुत ही गुणी हो बेटा। इन भोले भाले बच्चों को तू अपने जादू से भले ही खुश कर ले क्रिस। मेरे असुरों के सामने तेरे ये छोटे मोटे करतब किसी का आगे नहीं है।
बस भी कीजिए कनिष्क अंकल, आपके हर
तेरा ख्याल तो मैं बहुत अच्छे से रखता क्रिस के बच्चे। अगर ये बारिश
से लेना होगा बच्चों। मैं तो अपनी प्यास बुझा रहा था। चलो कोई बात नहीं, पानी लेकर आता हूँ।
So Chris is not allowed to use magic for his own benefits, only for the benefit of others.
हाँ क्रिस, बस तेरी ही कमी थी, वो भी पूरी हो गई।
There's a fight where he's rescuing his friends. Actually skipped through.
क्रिस, मैंने एक डरावना सपना देखा कि एक बड़ा सा राक्षस हमें खा गया, पर भगवान कृष्ण ने बचा लिया।
जय श्री कृष्ण मेरे दोस्त, कृष्ण सभी की रक्षा करते हैं।
So coming back to my paper, I just wanted to show these reinterpretations, particularly the roll number 21 and the one which did not open right now, which is Kisna, and it's set in a different village called Anand Nagri, which where he again has to constantly fight against demons sent by a neighboring country and save his people. Now all these 4 animation programs, they revolve around the heroic adventures of the child Krishna and how he saves his family, friends and villagers from various calamities. Krishna, or his avatar, is always the single-handed slayer of the demons and the saviors from the dire misfortunes. Now, all these derivatives of Krishna adventures then become a perpetuation in some way or the other of the superhero myth, emerging as a competitor for the likes of the Western animation superstars like Spider-Man, Batman, or Superman, though the popularity, I'm sure, has not yet gone to that level. But then this opinion actually has been voiced by Nina Ilavia Jaipuria, who's the senior vice president of Nick India, also the channel which airs Little Krishna, who says that, I quote, "There's no reason why Little Krishna can't be as big as a Superman or Spider-Man," unquote. She says this in an interview in the E version of the Hindustan Times. And this brings out clearly the future of these animation episodes that most of their creator producers have in mind. Now, these cartoons, though based upon the mythological figure, lack the complexity of the character of Krishna as presented in the Mahabharata, and presents only a single dimension of this protagonist. He's just a slayer of the evildoers without the infinite wisdom that mythology bestows upon him. The solution to most of the problems always has to come through violence. And that is the place where there's an uncanny similarity between the superheroes of the Marvel and DC comics and this homebred, mythically derived superhero. As Ashok Bankar, he's the author of Ramayana series and one person responsible for bringing myth more into the popular visual media. He says, I quote, these shows extract individual elements from mythology under the mistaken impression that they are picking up the cool elements, the superpowers, battles, romances, adventures, etc., and not realize that it's like ripping off piece of fabric from a brilliant design or stealing stones and carvings from a timeless monument. the parts are not whole. This sentiment is also echoed by another person responsible for popularizing the mythological writings, Devdutt Patnaik. Now, in an effort to make these mythological figures universally appealing, the makers of these animation series have heavily secularized the protagonist. This holds true particularly for the remaking of the Krishna myths, productions like Roll Number 21 and Kisna in particular. This then further alienates these episodes from any larger philosophical context and presents a sort of monochromatic world where there are horrible-looking, blood-spawning, fire-breathing and all kinds of monsters who understand only the language of violence and nothing else. Neither the good nor evil has there any reason and exist just for the sake of it. The children are drawn by the larger-than-life heroes who look very similar to them yet possess enormous strength and sometimes intelligence. And that is one of the areas where it differ from the previous generation superheroes, that these characters are very much like their own selves, so they can relate more to them. Another area that requires exploration is the gender representation within these animations. Even before the visual media came into being, children's reading was already fraught with gender issues. Here I quote from one of the books edited by Professor Nilanjana Gupta, The Reading Children, where she says that while in 19th century there was a rising awareness in India regarding the need for children's literature in Bengal, this concept had taken root earlier and deeper. Yet the exclusion of girl character from children's fiction remained a reality for quite long. It was quite significant as by early 20th century by early 20th century even the girls had started getting education. Now, ironically, this remains true for this particular genre of animations as well, because the representation of girls have not changed much here. In all the above discussed characters, the stories revolve around a single superhero, Krishna. Gender representation is always in the favor of the male child. Krishna and his playmates are mostly males, with just one female figure in the core group of the protagonist's friends. Even when represented on screen, these women or girl characters are not assigned any meaningful roles. In all the 4 animations of Krishna, Balram, Kisna, and Roll Number 21 and Little Krishna, there's just a single girl in each of these series who's a part of the protagonist's coterie. Other female characters present in the animation series are either the mother of the protagonist or village women or some inconsequential female characters without any active agency. The only active agency that is attributed to female characters come in the guise of witches and sorceresses who are out to catch the innocent children or even adults. And this too is a trend which I find is in continuation with the that existed right with the Grimm's fairy tales, which abounded in cruel stepmothers and witches, or if we come closer home to the Bengali collection of fairy tales like Thakumar Jhuli, where again the Daini or the Rakhoshi Rani, which means the witch or the demon queen, were quite active female agents. In the animation series under consideration here, female demons and she-devils abound in plenty, and all are, of course, ultimately single-handedly thwarted by the protagonist. Perpetuation of the gender stereotype focuses upon the lack of gender sensitization in the society, which produces such shows. Again, to actually reiterate what Professor Gupta had been talking about in the same book, that literature holds very much, what she had been talking in terms of literature actually holds true for in the field of animation as well, that children's stories and textbooks often reveal more about the adults' politics and semiotics than the adult stories do. This has been also the trend of thought since today's deliberations in the morning sessions as well. So the lack of gender equality inherent within the society is revealed through these animation series. Now, effect of television has always been a debatable area among researchers, with one group saying that it is the violence on screen leads to aggression among youth, but then there has not been any concrete data available for the long-term negative effect of violence in television upon the children or the adolescent viewers. Yet, these extremely popular children's shows definitely reflect the structure of the society and therefore, in certain ways, shape the identities of the children. Television viewing has also, to a certain extent, replaced the storytelling in the modern urban family setup by the elder members of the family. In such a scenario, then, a child fed on the diet of these oversimplified, superheroic representation of mythical characters lose upon the richness of their culture. While a boy child grows upon a diet of male superhero cult without any active and positive intervention by any female character, the girl child actually grows up without any such female counterpart. And if literature is a reflection of the society, then by extension, even these animations reflect the social structure of the society in which it is being produced. Thank you.
We have run out of time, but I think we can at least have 5 minutes for any deliberations, any questions or comments to be made regarding the research papers.
In Hindu mythology, I have seen some cartoons, these comic books, in which demons are usually represented in bluish skin color, and with tusk, like vampires. Is it the real concept in the Hindu mythology that it is a traditional concept? Is it?
The concept of demon actually comes from Rakshas, and if we take the debate, the discourse to the this discourse actually also has a racist concern to it of being a fight between the Aryans and the non-Aryans, where it is one discourse where the non-Aryans have been represented as demons and by the Aryans who gradually had spread their a sort of colonization. So therefore, if we look at it from this aspect, then what we know as Rakshas or demons are just others. There's the concept of othering. Now, the modern representation in cartoons, in animations, in children's, but more so in the children fiction, they have been given various colors and various shapes and sizes. In fact, I find quite a number of them being similar to the dragons and dinosaurs, probably because those are creatures which entice children more. And I don't know, but I'm not very aware of there being such a representation in the myths originally. So I think we can wind up this session, the second session. Just before winding up, I would like to call upon Professor Margaret if she could come out and hand over these certificates to the resource persons. Ms. Deepa Agarwal.
I think we should have a vote of thanks for Margaret because you put together such a wonderful thing for all of us. So I think.
Professor Bipash Chaudhary.
Professor Bipash Chaudhary, please ask. I think he's just outside. Can somebody?
Professor Bipash Chaudhary, if you could just come and. Dr. Anjali Multani. Professor Arthang Vunga. Dr. Lalrindiki Fanai. Professor Laltluang Liana Kyangte, I think is not here. Dr. Nabanita Sengupta. And Ms. Khalida Ahmed. So I think with this we wind up the session. Thank you, everybody.